Hello, I'm Joan Brown, and it's my great pleasure to host this segment of the Marin Women's Hall of Fame show. Since 1987, the Hall of Fame has inducted over 140 Marin women of distinction, women who have made immense contributions to the County of Marin and its residents, as well as to the world beyond. Honorees have distinguished themselves in many fields: education, science, business, philanthropy, the arts, politics, law, philosophy, health, and religion. Each honoree has been a force for positive change in the community. It is a great privilege to acknowledge and document their contributions. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce Jeannine Herron, who's being honored in 2019 for her pioneering work in early literacy. So Jeannine, let's begin at the beginning.
Okay.
And we'd like to hear about your early childhood and the people who influenced you and early experiences that you had that kind of led you on the path that you have taken so magnificently.
Okay. Well, I was raised in Berkeley on Russell Street. My mother was French. She was a singer. She sang in the French Opera in San Francisco. So from her, we sang a lot together, and I got my love of music, I think, from her. And she taught French at the Anna Head School, and enabled me to go to that school. My father was a Midwest Quaker. I think from him, I got a lot of my sense of purpose. He was a pacifist in the First World War. He believed, like many religions do, that we should treat one another the way we want to be treated ourselves. And his favorite phrases were, play fair, do what's right. If something's worth doing at all, it's worth doing well. And he was a very strong influence on my life. He became a teacher. He was trained as an architect, but he became a teacher during the Depression and taught at Alameda High School. They sent me to Whittier College after Anna Head, and I finished most of my work by the end of my third year, and I was studying religion and science, and I was influenced by my religion teacher there. And we went on a tour of the Middle East. I was studying world religions and trying to figure out my whole sense of what religion was all about. And we stayed in a school in Ramallah, which was at that point in Jordan. It's in the West Bank. And they needed a teacher. So they asked my professor who he would recommend, and he recommended me. And
this is your junior year.
This is my junior. I was 19 years old. And so I decided to stay. That was a big decision. I should have probably gone back to college, and I'm sure my parents would have preferred for me to do that. The Middle East was kind of in an unstable state at that moment.
What year was this?
This was 1956. And we were evacuated out during the Suez War to Beirut. But my husband was also a conscientious objector and was doing his alternative service, teaching at this Quaker school in Ramallah. So we were evacuated out, and we got married in Beirut.
How long had you known each other?
Oh, about 3 months.
It will never last.
It will never last. It's lasted 61 years. And he has been a profound influence on my life, really opened up the world to me. He was educated at Princeton, a very different kind of education where they had to do precepts and discuss issues, which I more memorized the answers to tests and went through education that way. So it was a wonderful influence, and he's a great adventurer and intellect and political activist, and I love him very much. So after Ramallah, we came back to this country, And we had 2 children. Matthew was born in 1957, and Melissa was born in 1959. And we moved to Philadelphia. She was born in Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, Matt worked for the American Friends Service Committee, and we got very involved in peace work. It was a time when there was a lot of nuclear testing going on. And at one point, a woman in Washington, Dagmar Wilson, called for a women's strike for peace. She just said, every woman needs to get out on the corner, take the day off from work, and go out and speak out about nuclear testing and this threat of nuclear destruction that we're facing. And so, so I went to Washington, and we did this demonstration, and it became a very active group. We collected baby teeth, because we were testing in the atmosphere. The strontium-90, the radioactive strontium-90 was coming down into the grass. The cows were eating the grass.
Right.
The children were drinking the milk and getting strontium-90 in their teeth.
Wow.
So we got all the tooth fairies together and collected their teeth and showed the government that this was dangerous to our children. We also went to Geneva and lobbied at the Geneva disarmament conferences, and that was a big deal for me because I wasn't used to speaking in public. I was very shy, and it takes a passion and a purpose to get you out in front of people and saying what you believe.
So tell us about how you got to Mississippi and what that's all about.
Okay, so one night actually in Philadelphia, I got a call from one of my friends in Women's Strike for Peace, and she was in Jackson, and she said, Jeaninne, people from the north need to come down here. A man has just been shot, and we need to show our support for the people who are trying to do something about race relations in the South. And I said, I've got 2 kids, I don't have any money. She said, come. So I flew to Jackson. I walked in Medgar Evers' funeral procession, and I talked to people in Jackson. And the upshot of that was that we collected all our stuff and moved to Jackson 2 or 3 months later.
So your husband, was he a photographer then?
He was a photographer. He was working for the American Friends Service Committee as a photographer and writer.
And so he could transplant that work?
Yeah, he was also doing freelance work and beginning to have an agent in New York, Black Star Agency. So when we went south, he was hoping he could do stories about what was happening there. And he put together a team of photographers to document the changes in the South.
Right, I've seen those photographs.
With the mentorship of Dorothea Lange.
So then you started the first Head Start?
Yes. We were there for about a year. I worked with SNCC and worked in the photo lab with Julian Bond, and then my children were ready for preschool, and there was nothing available in Mississippi, and I was thinking a lot about the needs of children in Mississippi, and I got together with 2 other people, and we wrote a grant to the brand new Office of Economic Opportunity in Washington, and we got the grant and started the Head Start, the Child Development Group of Mississippi, and eventually we had about 5,000 kids around the state, many different centers.
Wow.
Yeah.
And yours was the first one in Mississippi?
In the country.
In the whole country?
In the whole country, yeah.
So
1965.
So that infant program became the role model for the whole country.
Well, everybody started their own. They had their own models, but we were the first.
Somewhere during this process, you decided to go back and get your PhD in neuropsychology.
I did. There was a little girl in one of these Head Starts who was sitting aside, and everybody else was playing, so I went and I sat next to her. And I said, what do you want to do in Head Start today? And she looked at me very seriously, and she said, I want to learn to read and write, and then I want to go home and teach my daddy. Oh. And I think that got to me. I think, and I had read a lot about dyslexia before, and I was very interested in why children had difficulty learning to read. And so I decided I need to know more about the brain and how the brain influences this whole process of learning to read. And that's why I went back for my PhD. We moved to New Orleans, and I was accepted into a PhD program at Tulane Medical School. And so that's where I got my PhD.
And so you had two little kids. You were working on a PhD.
Right.
Were you able to be a full-time student/mom, or were you also continuing to work?
We were sharing childcare, and it took me 4 years to get through the program. But
that seems pretty quick to me. So you also, besides studying children with dyslexia, did some work on left-handed kids? What's that
later.
about?
That was later when I got my postdoc at Langley Porter. So I actually finished my PhD at Stanford Research Institute with my mentor, who had moved from Tulane, and was lucky enough to be noticed by Bob Ornstein and David Gallen at Langley Porter, and went to do a postdoc with them. And that's when we did the study of left-handed brain organization in left-handedness, and also in dyslexia. Langley Porter was a very male place, and it was a very competitive place. And it was a psychiatric institute. It was very oriented toward Freud. There was no relationship between the neurology department and the psychiatry department, as if the brain had nothing to do with people's emotional or mental health. And so at one point I went to the head of my department and I said, "What should I do to get ahead here?" And he said, "You got to put on your jock strap, and you got to use your elbows and your heels, and because if you get ahead, somebody else is going to lose."
Whoa.
And I went to the bathroom and cried.
That's what I do too.
And then later I wrote a song called Jockstrap Blues. But I eventually left Langley Porter.
Well, wait. Did you change how you were representing yourself after that?
No, I was very happy being a woman. And I didn't want to try to be more like a man to get ahead in the world. I eventually, after 10 years, I left Langley Porter and started my own thing. And I gave conferences. I had given a conference at Langley Porter, and I gave conferences in neuropsychology to inform people about this new discipline, talking about the relationships between the brain and behavior. And we gave 50 around the country.
Wow.
And I did research in schools, so I started a nonprofit, and eventually decided that the way to change the way children were being taught to read was to develop some software to get phonics in the door, because really what was happening in California was a very strong movement towards what's called whole language, visually recognizing words, and children weren't learning to read. So anyway, that's how I got started in software. I didn't know how to do software, and I linked up with a wonderful mentor, Leslie Grimm, who was a founder of the Learning Company and the mother of Reader Rabbit and Rocky's Boots and a whole lot of those wonderful early software programs. And she, bless her heart, we tried to get something started at Broderbund, and they just didn't get it. They didn't get the whole pedagogical concept behind learning to write as a route to read. And so she said, "I'll fund it." We came out crying one day, and she said, "I'll fund it." And she put 2 years of her life into it. She put $600,000 into it. And she was just a blessing to my life.
Wow. That's commitment.
Yeah, it's commitment. Yes.
That is commitment.
Yes, she's a wonderful person.
So let's kind of go in another direction now.
Okay. Well, I want to say,
Oh, go ahead.
that because I started with software, I eventually got grants from the federal government, a small business innovative research grant, 5 of them, they're over $1 million each, to develop software for early literacy, and that's really how I got into the whole business of providing software and training for teachers.
So was that where you kind of rerouted your career?
That is. The reroute was really when I left Langley Porter and set out on my own, which was very scary. But the conferences supported the work that I was doing in the schools, and then we got grants from the Johnson Foundation and so on to proceed.
Fabulous, fabulous. So let's go back to 1970.
Oh, okay.
Which is a pretty significant reroute in your whole life.
Yeah.
And tell us what you and your family decided to do,
Okay.
and what the results were,
Okay.
and what you learned about yourselves as a family, and we just want to hear it all about it.
When I was in New Orleans at the Tulane Medical School, and my mentor decided to move to California, he said, I can't support you for another year. I have to go to Stanford Research Institute and get set up. But if you take a year off and come to Stanford, we'll finish the PhD. So we had a year to do something completely different. Our children were not enjoying school in New Orleans. They were spending much too much time watching television, and it was always a struggle, a struggle with the kids. So we decided to sail a small boat to Africa.
Of course. What else would you do with a year off? How did you pick that destination?
Well, partly because of the civil rights movement and because we were interested in the origins of the whole slave trade and so on, and just because it was a very interesting place to go, and other people hadn't gone there with sailboats at all. So,
So how big was your boat, and where did you go?
The boat was a 31-foot sloop. We sailed from New Orleans to Florida, through Florida, and then from Florida to Bermuda, across 28 days across the Pacific, the Atlantic, to the Azores. Spent some time in the Azores and the Canary Islands, and then hit the coast of Africa. And we spent almost 8 months going down the coast of Africa.
So were you both avid sailors before you took this on?
No. My husband had sailed a lot when he was young in Rochester, New York. But I had not sailed, and I got seasick.
Of course.
But it was an incredible adventure, and we spent a lot of time thinking about how we would educate our kids during this year and a half that we were gone. And actually, my son they both kept a log. They were 13 and 11. My son was 13, and we asked them to write every day. So that was part of our educational effort. And he wrote this book. It's his log, and it's Matt's pictures, and it's his impressions of what it was like to sail down the coast of Africa with his parents.
What happened to family dynamics?
The family dynamics were okay. Melissa was a little upset about going and leaving her friends and so on, and at one point...
So they were what, 9 and 11?
They were 11 and 13.
11 and 13.
At one point I said to her, we were between Florida and Bermuda, and I said to her, you know, Quakers have a tradition where they get together and talk about an issue, and if one person feels very strongly that a decision shouldn't be made, they can turn the whole thing around. And I said, if you feel strongly that we shouldn't do this, or you're uncomfortable about it, we'll turn around, or you can go and stay with my sister, or we'll find some other solution. And when we hit Bermuda straight on, she kind of relaxed and she said, okay, I guess if we can get to Bermuda, we can get across the ocean.
Did you have any like horrible, dangerous things?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we had a couple of gales, and it was very dramatic.
And do you think that, I mean, when you were going down the coast, did you go in on land? Did you have a lot of cultural exchange?
We did, we did. And Melissa became our little ambassador. She would go into the market and talk to people. And we took the boat 300 kilometers up the Gambia River into the interior. So we were visiting little villages like that had not changed for 100 years. It was
how incredible.
The hippopotamus in the water and monkeys in the trees.
Yeah, fabulous. So you were really influenced by your time in Mississippi in co-founding the first Head Start. And now you're back there. How many times have you been this year?
In the last 18 months, I've been about 17 times.
Okay. So you're planting seeds for a literacy rights revolution. Tell us quickly about that. It's such an interesting life cycle that here is this college kid, practically, you're down there, and here at age 82, you're still working and going strong.
Yes.
And you've got this huge commitment on the other side of the country.
Yeah, I know.
So,
well, you know, I feel like my roots began in Mississippi. I really got this commitment to reading and to literacy. And Mississippi needs help. Mississippi is doing its best with literacy, but not well enough. And one of the problems about literacy is not just in Mississippi, it's nationwide. We are 23rd among nations in literacy in
That's
America.
shocking, isn't it?
In America. It's very shocking. 2/3 of our kids cannot read proficiently. And it's partly because of the way that we teach reading. And it's the way teachers are prepared at the university level. What we need to change about the instruction of reading is to show children what they're doing with their mouth when they say a word. So if we talk about just phonemes as sounds that they need to hear, there's not a very good way to define that. But if we talk about them as speech bits, that each word is made up of a bit of speech, it's very concrete. You're doing it with your mouth. If you say p, you're putting your lips together and you're popping the air out. So you can talk about that with children, and you can change p to to d, and so on, and get them to realize that when they're saying words, they're making, each word is a linked bunch of speech bits. And those speech bits are represented by the alphabet. And those people long ago who invented the alphabet, they invented it in order to make speech visible.
They got it.
Make speech visible.
So tell us this other book.
Really, speech is the foundation of reading. And what we have to do is make sure that children get that. They have to reorganize their speech centers in the left side of their brain, which are already there, to consider words as speech bits rather than just as one whole sound. And the kids who struggle at 3rd and 4th grade aren't able to do that. They're not able to break a word into its sounds and speech bits.
Your story is so rich and has so many accomplishments, and you know, it's just fascinating. You've made such contributions. What do you see that your legacy is, and what it's impacted most?
Well, the software has been used by more than 500,000 children around the world, in every state, every province of Canada, about 30 different countries. It has voiceover help in 9 different languages, so it's being used with ESL kids as well. And it teaches kids to use the keyboard. So this finger says, this finger says ah, this finger says, so they're typing out words and phrases and sentences to dictation, so they have to think of what the words are and spell them out. The the reason that I'm going back to Mississippi and giving away the software is because it makes it very easy for volunteers to use it and for other people. So that's really my mission at the moment, and what I want to leave as a legacy to the world. I can't start another software project, but we have 3 different pieces of software from preschool to 3rd grade, including spelling rules and so on. So Mississippi has been a call to me, and what I want to do is spread that as much as I can. If my work in Mississippi is successful, if I can call for a civil rights literacy revolution. I did a keynote speech to 500 people in Biloxi last summer, and at the end I had them singing, "We shall all be literate. We shall all be literate."
Have you done anything at the college level in teaching teachers?
Not teaching teachers at the college level, but I do a lot of workshops for teachers at the school level. Besides the literacy, I'm really interested in the evolution of the brain, because as we began as human beings to talk, we programmed areas into the brain that are all set for speaking here, for comprehending here, big pathways between them. But there's no place for reading and writing because it's so new. So reading and writing are really influenced by the way the instruction happens. And so that's evolving. And the frontal lobes of the brain are the newest part of our brain, and where we learn to pay attention to interactions between people, paying attention to things, to considering the future and considering the future of our actions. And we need to pay more attention to how to instruct children in those things, because that part of the brain is really developing. We are women, and we know about children, and we need to convince the rest of our tribe to invest in children, to enable our children to become competent, courageous, and compassionate.
And I am guessing
leaders of the future.
That those are your wishes and hope for the future of the residents of Marin County.
That is right, absolutely, and the rest of the world.
And the rest of the world. Thank you, Jeaninne, so much for sharing stories from your incredible life with us. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. The Marin Women's Hall of Fame is a project of the YWCA of San Francisco and Marin. If you would like to learn more about the Hall of Fame and our honorees, please visit www.mwhf.org. Thank you.